Why something exists instead of nothing. The paradox of existence. Buddhist wisdom. The oldest question in the human heart. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a strange mix of wonder and confusion? Just by being alive and aware, this question eventually finds us. Why is there something instead of nothing? It's not just a scientific or philosophical curiosity. It's one of the deepest human questions. We wake up in a world full of trees, oceans, emotions, and galaxies. But why does anything exist at all? Wouldn't nothingness have been simpler? That puzzle has stirred minds for thousands of years, from ancient mystics to modern physicists. The 17th century philosopher Gottfried Leibniz famously asked this exact question, and Heidegger called it the fundamental question of metaphysics. Some religious traditions answer, because a creator made it. Aristotle proposed a first mover, something that caused all other things but was itself uncaused. Today, many people point to the Big Bang. But even then, we're left wondering, what came before that? And why were the laws of physics just right for a universe to appear? Every answer seems to spark another question. The ancient philosopher Parmenides even argued that true nothingness can't exist, because the moment we try to think about nothing, we're already turning it into a kind of something. Pure non-being, it seems, is impossible to truly imagine. But this isn't just abstract debate. The question touches something personal. In quiet moments, many of us have felt it. What does it mean that I exist? Or, what's the point of life if it all came from nowhere and ends in death? These aren't just philosophical puzzles. They are emotional ones. The mystery of existence confronts us when someone we love dies, when we feel alone, or when we sit silently and wonder about our place in everything. For some, the question brings awe. For others, anxiety. But no matter who we are, it eventually arrives. Why is there anything at all? Before diving into Buddhist wisdom, it's important to honor the weight of this question. It is not a Western invention, nor just a scientific curiosity. It's a human question, ancient, universal, and raw. It has stirred sages in India, Greece, China, and beyond. And while some traditions offer creation stories or divine causes, Buddhism takes a very different path. It doesn't deny the mystery, but it invites us to look at it from a new angle, not through abstract theories, but through direct experience. That's where we'll begin next. The Buddha's wisdom. Looking into causes, not origins. When asked about the origin of the universe, whether the world had a beginning or will have an end, the Buddha often remained silent. This wasn't because he didn't know or didn't care, but because he saw that such questions rarely lead to peace. Instead of encouraging speculation, he directed our attention to what truly matters. As he once said, "I teach only suffering and the end of suffering." That clarity of purpose shaped the entire Buddhist path. Rather than asking how everything began, we ask, why do we suffer, and how can we be free? There's a famous parable that captures this approach. A man is struck by a poisoned arrow. His friends rush to help, but he refuses treatment. He insists on first knowing who shot the arrow, what kind of wood it was made from, what tribe the attacker belonged to. Meanwhile, the poison is spreading. The Buddha used this story to show how our craving for metaphysical certainty can distract us from the urgent work of liberation. In the same way, obsessing over why something exists, while fascinating, can take us away from the lived truth. We are already here. We love, we grieve, we age. The real question becomes, what can we do with this experience? Instead of offering a creation myth, the Buddha taught dependent origination, paticca samuppada, the insight that everything arises due to causes and conditions. Nothing exists independently, and nothing begins from nothing. A tree grows because there was a seed, water, soil, sunlight, and time. Likewise, your existence is not the result of a single cause, but a vast web of conditions, your ancestors, your culture, your breath in this very moment. Even the universe itself, in Buddhist cosmology, is seen as beginningless, not in the sense of being eternal, but as a flow of conditions with no ultimate starting point. As the Buddha said, samsara is without a discoverable beginning. This view may sound abstract, but it's deeply practical. Rather than asking what started everything, Buddhism asks, what sustains this moment right now? If we understand the conditions that give rise to suffering, like craving, ignorance, and clinging, then we can begin to remove those conditions. In that removal, suffering ceases. So in a very real way, Buddhism answers the question, why is there something? By saying, because conditions allow it. And those conditions are not fixed. They can be transformed. Some ancient texts do contain stories of world cycles, universes expanding and collapsing, but these are not presented as absolute origins. They are mythic backdrops for understanding the endless movement of birth and death, formation and dissolution. In this way, Buddhism aligns with certain scientific views too. Just as some physicists argue that time itself began with the Big Bang, rendering before meaningless, Buddhism suggests that looking for a first cause may miss the point. What matters is how the process works now. One of the most profound aspects of this causal process is karma. Often misunderstood, karma is not fate or punishment. It is the law of intentional action. According to the Buddha, we are born, not by chance or divine decree, but because of volitional actions driven by craving and ignorance. Our consciousness seeks conditions to continue. This means we are not passive products of the universe. We are active participants. Our past actions shaped our current life, and our present choices shape what comes next. In this view, why do I exist becomes a deeply personal question. What have I carried forward? And what will I create now? This perspective stands in contrast to Western thinkers like Aristotle or Aquinas, who proposed a first uncaused cause, often equated with God. The Buddha neither affirmed nor denied such a being. Instead, he moved the discussion entirely. He warned against both extremes: the eternalist belief that everything always exists in some absolute way, and the nihilist belief that nothing matters at all. Instead, he taught the middle way, the path of understanding conditionality. As the texts say, everything exists. This is one extreme. Nothing exists. This is the other extreme. The Tathagata teaches the Dharma by the middle. That middle way leads us back to the present. We may not know the universe's final answer, but we can know something more useful: how to live with wisdom. The Buddha's teachings guide us not to theorize endlessly, but to observe clearly. We know suffering. We know joy. We know what it feels like to cling and what it feels like to let go. Through ethical living, meditation, and insight, we stop fueling the cycle. In this way, we move from asking, "Why is there something?" to a deeper, more liberating question. Given that I'm here, how can I live with freedom and compassion? Emptiness, interdependence, and the path between extremes. Once we stop asking what created the universe and instead begin to observe how things arise, a new kind of question opens up. What does it really mean for something to exist? This is where one of the most profound insights in Buddhism comes in: the teaching of emptiness, shunyata. Emptiness doesn't mean nothing exists. It means that things don't exist in the way we assume. Not independently, not permanently, and not with a fixed self-nature. To say something is empty is to say it exists only in relation to other things. Everything arises through causes and conditions. Nothing stands alone. You might think of a wave on the ocean. The wave is real. You can see it, feel its force. But separate it from the ocean, and it disappears. Likewise, you are not a fixed, isolated entity. You are a flowing combination of body, breath, memories, culture, and consciousness, all shifting moment to moment. Change one condition, and you change too. This is what Buddhism calls not-self, anatta. There's no unchanging core behind experience, only process unfolding. This insight reaches poetic clarity in the Heart Sutra, which states, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." Form refers to everything we experience: thoughts, trees, emotions, galaxies. These forms aren't illusions, but they're empty of permanent essence. And emptiness doesn't mean some void outside the world. It shows up as the world. The wave is water, and water, when moving, becomes waves. Because things are not fixed, they can appear, change, and fade away. This was also the core insight of Nagarjuna, who clarified the middle way between believing in fixed existence and total non-existence. He taught, "Whatever arises dependently is empty, and precisely because it is empty, it can function. If anything had an unchanging essence, it could neither begin nor end." So paradoxically, emptiness is what allows everything to exist, move, and transform. The Buddha himself expressed this in the Kakanagata Sutta, where he cautioned against the extremes of saying, "Everything truly exists," or "Nothing exists at all." Things arise when conditions support them, and cease when conditions fall away. Reality is not a static substance or a meaningless void. It's a living, shifting process. And to see this clearly is wisdom. That wisdom reveals something quietly radical. Nothing truly exists on its own. Take a simple piece of paper. Inside it are the sun, the rain, the soil, the logger, and even the food that gave him strength to cut the tree. The paper is empty of a separate identity, yet full of everything it depends on. Its being is made entirely of what it is not. Practically, this insight frees us from the illusion that things are solid. When we cling to people, ideas, or even our own self-image, we suffer, because we're trying to hold on to what cannot last. Understanding emptiness helps us release that grip, and in that space, compassion arises. If everything is connected, then your pain is not separate from mine. We rise and fall like waves in the same ocean. That's why seeing emptiness naturally gives rise to empathy. Other traditions have touched this truth too. Taoism celebrates the usefulness of absence. Shape clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. A room is usable because of its emptiness. In the West, thinkers like Alan Watts have noted that sound and silence define each other. Being and non-being are not opposites, but partners. Without absence, nothing can appear. Without change, nothing can live. The Buddhist path is to walk between those extremes. Even modern science seems to echo this. In quantum physics, so-called empty space teems with fluctuations. Particles flicker in and out of being. Reality behaves like probability, not permanence. Of course, science and Buddhism speak different languages, but both hint that the world isn't as solid as it seems. The deeper we look, the more we find openness, uncertainty, and movement, not as problems, but as the very conditions for life. So why is there something instead of nothing? Buddhism replies, because things are empty, they can arise. Emptiness is not a void that erases existence, but the ground that allows it. The universe doesn't need a first cause. It doesn't stand on one fixed reason. It flows from condition to condition. And in that flow, we're invited not just to understand, but to live. Not clinging to being, not fearing non-being, but walking the middle way, where everything is always becoming. Finding meaning and comfort in the mystery of existence. After everything we've explored, you might still feel, but I still don't have a final answer to why there's something rather than nothing. And that's perfectly okay. Buddhism teaches us to find peace in not knowing, not as a lack, but as a kind of wisdom. The Greek philosopher Socrates once said, "I know that I know nothing." This wasn't ignorance, but a posture of humility. Similarly, the Buddha encouraged us to stand in quiet wonder before life, rather than rush to fill every gap with an answer. The truth is, existence itself is a mystery, and Buddhism invites us not to fear that, but to treasure it. Wonder, after all, is a doorway to wisdom. Even though Buddhism doesn't offer a one-sentence answer to this great question, it gives us something deeper, a sense of purpose within existence. To be born as a human being is described as incredibly rare, like a blind turtle surfacing once every 100 years and by chance slipping its head through a floating ring. In other words, this life is not random noise. It's a precious opportunity. Instead of asking, "Why are we here?" with frustration, Buddhism gently says, "You are here. Now, what will you do with it?" And this leads us to meaning. Sometimes, the idea that life has no cosmic answer makes people feel lost. But Buddhism doesn't require meaning to come from outside. It tells us, create it. Each moment is a canvas, each breath a chance to live with care. Meaning is born through our choices. How we treat others, how we grow through pain, how we open to life. If something exists, then love can exist. Growth, kindness, and awakening become possible. That's meaning enough. When we pause and really feel it, the fact that something exists at all can fill us with quiet gratitude. Warm sunlight, a shared smile, the taste of a ripe fruit. None of these could happen in nothingness. Being alive, even for a short while, is a gift we rarely recognize until it slips away. Meditation teaches us to appreciate the simple miracle of this very moment, not in theory, but in experience. that breath, that heart beating, that awareness right now. And because we are alive, we can still transform ourselves and the world around us. At the same time, Buddhism doesn't demand blind faith in answers. It respects uncertainty. A famous metaphor compares the Dharma to a raft, a tool to cross the river of suffering. Once you've crossed, you don't keep carrying the raft on your back. Even the teachings, even the frameworks we've explored here, are not dogmas. They are tools for liberation. In the end, the paradox of existence is not something to solve, but something to experience fully. Maybe when awakening comes, the question dissolves into silence. Until then, it's enough to walk this path with eyes open. And on this path, compassion becomes our compass. If we're all here, and none of us are separate, then the most natural response is to help one another. Perhaps this is one of the deepest answers Buddhism gives to the mystery. We exist so we can love. In the Mahayana tradition, the Bodhisattva vows to keep returning, not to escape existence, but to be present within it, for the sake of others. Such a person might say, "I'm glad there is something, because that means I can be of use." In a world that doesn't offer all the answers, that kind of love is answer enough. We've journeyed from cosmic puzzles to the silence of the present moment. Buddhism doesn't hand us certainty, but it does offer clarity. Understand what causes suffering. Live with compassion. Let go of clinging. Appreciate what is here. The question, why is there something rather than nothing, remains, but it no longer haunts. It becomes a kind of sacred background music to the song of life. In a way, each moment you truly live is the answer.